that, since it's new, anything that comes to mind that we could talk about. So if anybody has any questions or it's not clear or you want to debate about it, that's fine. Go ahead and raise your hand, speak up, whatever. The rubber net thing is just kind of a universal thing that folks have kind of preached for a long time, because the old, especially the old cotton netted twine stuff, the old cotton stuff actually absorbs slime. So what you don't want to do is knock off slime on the fish when you catch them, because that's part of their protective coating for diseases and things like that. So the whole idea is to keep their slime coat intact. Most of the rubber stuff, the twine's wider. It's not something that digs into the side of the fish as well. So it's just a common practice that those rubber nets are much kinder to the fish than previous alternatives. The wet in your hands thing, it's the same principle. You grab a fish with dry hands, and our hatchery managers have mentioned that sometimes when they're handling fish in the hatcheries. Occasionally, the whole hatchery operation for taking in brood stock is stressful for those fish. Some fish do fairly well in aquariums and being handled and all that kind of stuff and being in enclosures. Stripers don't. They freak out. If we put, I put stripers, held them in tanks a couple times for this transmitter stuff and experimenting with things, and you're lucky if you can get a week out of them. A lot of times they just die of stress, even in the right time of year, cool water and all that. But sometimes the hatchery folks have mentioned that just from handling their fish, and they put them in these tanks to spawn, and they can take them out 4 or 5 days later, 4 days later, and they'll have handprints on them that are red from where the slime got compromised. And then with the fish being stressed, that's something, they already got spots on them and things starting to get infected. Fish diseases are in the water all the time, just like pneumonia is in the air for us. So people get sick, they get colds, they get flus, and if your body's all kicking right and everything's firing on all cylinders and you're healthy, usually you fight it off. Fish are the same way. There's all kinds of diseases, bacterial stuff that's in the water. Healthy fish usually doesn't succumb to it. So it's when they're compromised or stressed real bad that these infections can take its toll. So the net and the hands are just one way to try and keep that slime coating intact. Some kind of needle nose, really good pliers to get fish out. If you go with somebody who doesn't have that equipment and they want to release fish, and you got a treble hook or a hook that's hooked bad, or even a single hook that's hooked deep, somebody can fight with that fish for a long time to try and get a hook out. Just a good set of pliers goes a long way in speeding up the process and doing less damage for the fish. A lot of this handling time, if you don't have to take the fish out of the water, if you can just leave it in the net and unhook it, that's the best way to do it. You don't have to lift them in the boat. So if it's something that you know you want to release and you don't want to take a picture or anything, and it's possible to do it, and usually it's with single hooks. Usually treble hooks, you can't leave them in the water very good. But if that's an option, that can help their survival. There's been discussions came up about how to hold a fish, which kind of seems silly. We even put something out a long time ago that our agency wrote and said, don't hold the fish vertical. Always support them with your other hand, a bigger fish. And I tried to, I called them up and I said, where did you get this stuff? And I went round and round, couldn't find anybody that said, yeah, holding a fish perfectly vertical is bad for them. So I don't know how that one started, but they said, well, it might have been, there's been a lot of concern or complaints sometimes with the bass anglers about how they hold fish because they want to angle them for a picture. And sometimes when you're trying to torque the fish with all its body weight and trying to hold it by the jaw, sometimes that could be detrimental to the jaw. So if you want the fish the more horizontal, yes, put a hand under it and always support it. But some of the other stuff that came out and said, just don't hold the fish straight up and down or any other, you got to always use two hands, and I don't think that's the case. So that was part of it, is if you are turning it, just support it and don't just do it by the jaw or just hold it perfectly vertical. If you got a deep hooked fish, and that's usually with single hook lures or bait, it's best to just cut the line and give it the best chance. If you have to go in real deep and you got to take a long time to try and wrench it out and you're tearing out meat and stuff, you're a whole lot better with leaving the hook in there. And unless it's a special hook, they rust out pretty quick. So if you leave a hook back deep in the roof of its mouth or something, it's a whole lot healthier for the fish just to cut the line and go than to sit there and fight with it and tear it up to try and get it out. Generally speaking, compared to other fish, stripers are wimps when it comes to handling. They do not handle well at all. And the bigger they get, normally a bigger fish is an older fish. So especially if you have the really larger fish, they have a tendency to be the older ones. Just like us, we're not as hardy and youthful, and we could take younger kids, teenagers can usually take a beating and fall down, roll around, run into things, and they're up and going. Us, not so much, at least me and probably some others sitting in here. And those fish are no different. You can catch a big trophy fish that's probably more fragile than some of these smaller fish. So just keep that in mind, that probably the bigger the fish, the more critical all these things become on that surviving. Just some hook stuff, and that's none of my research. I just looked at some of the other folks who've done some work and research on that, and those were just recommendations on the different kind of hooks to use for catch and release. Nothing that I've done myself for any kind of studies. It's just other studies have come up with that information. Then we get into what causes a lot of arguments about catch and release, is the time of year and water temperatures and all that, which is, again, why Nathan's here and we're doing this big study.
Hey, Dan,
yes.
With the rubber nets, I don't know about what y'all got. I went on and purchased a rubber net here a couple of years ago. I wish I would have waited, but some of the rubber nets, the one I got, it's all rubber, but it's got a lining where it brings the net together. It's a lining in it. It's made out of felt or made out of nylon or something. And I don't know if y'all, mine ain't all rubber. But every time them hooks still get into that line, and say anyone that purchases a net, it saved you money, because this was like 40 some bucks, and it wouldn't get the one. And they do have them out there. They're a little higher, but they are fully rubber net, no inseams or anything in it. And it's a lot. Second thing I would say, they make them, and I got one. I don't even know where I got it. You could probably, it's a glove, like a fish glove. You know, when these fish are fighting, all right, and it's kind of often, it takes a little while. You have your glove. I have my glove right there on the deck, and I have rod. I reach down with my glove. I'm right-handed, and I grab the fish with the glove. You can get it wet too. I don't know what kind of glove it is, but if a hook won't go into the glove, go into your hand. It protects your hand. If you can get a hold of the striper and have your other, and you got your pole, you got to drop the pole here. Now this is me doing this, but I'm trying to keep the fish in the water, and plus I'm trying to keep this fish from. I don't know about y'all, but I've had them stripers throw the hooks in my hand. I have been hooked by them. But anyway, take another your long plug. Remove your like the pliers and get in there with the fish in the water. A lot of times you can do it like that. So I don't know if that works for anybody else, but it kind of helps keeping it from getting in the boat and the net thing, because a lot of times them things get thrashed in a net. And hooks go in the net and it get caught, and then you try to get the fish out of the net, out of that tangle up. It seems like it's a little bit more harder on the fish, and harder on me too. I don't know if that makes sense.
Originally, when we were going to do this study, it was just going to be all summertime, the heat of the summer. And my interest in having them come up in the spring was kind of that, because I'd been out with people that fished at night before, and they've got big F-18s with 3 treble hooks, and then you catch a fish and you get it in, and then you get this hook out, and then another one gets stuck in it, and then it's tangled all in the net, and the fish is tangled, the net's tangled, and by the time you get done, a lot of those fish go through this lengthy process where what we've done last summer with the catch and release is go to single hook jigs and try and do the whole process as quick as possible. The beginning of this was to try and get a fish in the boat the fastest possible, process as quickly as possible, and get rid of it to see best case scenario how that fish does. But one of the reasons I was interested in doing this, because a lot of this springtime fishing isn't real quick like that when people are using plugs. So I wanted to try just what folks out there are doing right now and see if there's any more, because the temperatures are kind of in between, and what the mortality was like during that time of year. Left off kind of the cold months. I know fish are durable in the wintertime, and I know we've told this story before, but leading into this study, we were going through some different, trying to figure out the best technique to tag fish, and we caught, how big was that fish we caught? 32 inches? We caught a 32-incher in February. And the idea was we're going to attach a transmitter on the exterior of the fish to see if there was a way that a fish could be brought in the boat and basically just snap this thing on and let it go. But first we're going to put a transmitter inside that the fish couldn't shed. We know for sure that that one was going to hold up, and then attach a few of them on the outside and see if they fell off. So first fish we caught, 32-incher, went ahead, opened it up, put a tag inside, sewed it up, and then tried to apply something on the exterior to the body. We could not get a tag to stick on that fish. We handled it for 30 minutes, probably, beating the fire out of it. I mean, it already had surgery on it, and we kept putting a tag on it and jerking on it, and it would pull off. So put it on tighter and seal it up and pull it off. And it's in the live well, and well, what should we do now? Okay, well, let's try this. Pull it back out, hands all over it, really working on it hard. And then we got done and said, well, there's just no way we can get this idea or this technique to work, so this isn't going to work. What do we do with the fish? And I said, we've just handled this fish and beat it up. There's no way it's a bigger fish. There's no way it's going to live. So we ought to just go ahead and somebody ought to eat it. And nobody wanted to eat it. It was like,
well, we didn't have a cooler with us.
It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we ended up putting it back in the water. I'm thinking, well, that was a nice gesture, but it probably would have been to better use if we had just eaten the darn thing. And then a month later, I get a picture that a guide caught it because it had the sutures on it. And that was in March, and then it was caught in July again, and released in July in the warm weather, and it hasn't been, nobody's reported it since then. So, but the moral of that story was, I wouldn't suggest beating on a fish with a cane in the wintertime for 30 minutes. But the idea is that they can take a lot of catch and release handling and abuse kind of in the wintertime when it's really cold, it's the coldest part of the year. And it's, you know, if you treat a fish good and it's been hooked good, you go through the best practices, the chance of that fish living is almost 100% when the water's real cold. But then you get into these problems of, you jump from that extreme to this hot summer extreme, which we're trying to get an idea what the summer heat does for catch and release. And then there's this section in between that's still kind of unknown. So I kind of came up with some scenarios the best I could, and I can't say is that this is an absolute. And there could be a kind of a temperature range once it gets over a certain temperature, you know, your mortality just automatically goes way up. And I don't know what that is. But in any case, the move from the winter months, I just don't want to leave the impression that you should beat all your fish up before you let them go. One thing on that descending tool, which we covered in some other in another meeting, and there's some pictures. You can either make one or you can buy one. But this is a great time to use a descending tool, because if you catch a big fish in the wintertime and you don't get him in right away, it came from deep, which a lot of the wintertime fish do come from deep, you may end up with a floater. And one of the problems is just getting them in up to the boat and in the boat, it kind of wears them out. And they have a hard time swimming back down. They're healthy, I think their survival's fine, but they just can't get back down to depth because their air bladder swells up so much. And I've had some of those in the cold months that they'll even swim down 10, 12 feet and they're tired, and then they just stop swimming for a second. As soon as they stop, they just shoot right back up because of that big balloon. So the descending device just sets them back down there where they're neutrally buoyant. They don't have to fight that anymore, and they can recover there. Those kind of in-between months, April, May, November, those are kind of usually some cooler months. I think this descending device would still be useful if the temperatures are pretty cool. But obviously we're in a transitional time, so you need to start being a little bit more careful, and the mortality is going to probably go up a little bit. You don't want to get the fish in as quick as you can and limit your handling time as much as you can, but you still have a little leeway. You got these more transitional months here, and sometimes, like we were talking, you start off June and it was pretty cool. A week and a half, 2 weeks later, the temperature went up over 10 degrees. So those are kind of in that questionable zone because you don't know what the weather's going to be like. Same thing in October. The water could be still almost 80 degrees at early October, and you could get to the end of October and it could be down mid to lower 60s, just depending on what the weather's been like. So it's really one of those kind of have some idea what the water temperatures are like and practice accordingly.
And Dan, back to that descending tool, we got the write-up that you did is on our website, so
Yep.
people can go there and figure out how to make one for almost nothing.
Yep.
Pretty simple.
One thing I might add, summertime. If you get a fish that's floating in the summertime, take it home, because you did a descending device on in summertime, and if they're not making it down on their own in the summer, they're probably not going to make it. So don't think, okay, if I got some fish that are looking kind of rough in the summer and they don't really want to swim down, if that's the case, you better take them home because they're not going to make it anyway. So sending them down with some kind of device isn't going to fix the problem.
Any other questions for Dan?
Can we get this
Yes.
sent to us or something?
Yeah, I think, John, you're gonna put this out in like.
Yeah, we wanted to let Dan go over it, and then I'll distribute it, and I'll also post it on the website. So you'll both get it in your email, and if you miss it, you just go to the site, and it'll be on that resources page.
And the whole plan of this study that we're doing is to really put some better numbers on all this information. The idea is to let the anglers know that if they fish in the summertime, what their chances of fish surviving is. Is it 50%? Is it 20%? Is it 80%? We don't know, but we want to provide you the information so that you're comfortable with however you're practicing, however that turns out. And it can somewhat limit the discussion, because somebody who likes to do catch and release in the summer say, oh, my fish live, and then the next guy that's really conserved and wants to protect the fishery said, no, most of those are dying, you shouldn't. So there's been this back and forth debate ever since I've been here for 30-some years. So we're just trying to really quantify what those numbers really are and if it's really making any impacts on the fishery.
Dan, I've noticed it just in the last week. I fished top water, we're on my B43. At 0 to 5, they were going down no problem. Right now, I call it fish head season for me. So I get my two, sometimes I'm home in 15, 20 minutes, but I'm looking forward to, July, August, because it's completely different. You know, you're pulling them out of 80 feet, 100 feet of water, and they're already cold, but the fish on the top water right now, they don't make it. For me, being up 43, thermocline's already there, and it's hot.
That was one of the things going into this process that we had discussed about, because really didn't know for sure how fish coming out of cold water would do, because the previous studies, fish were caught in warm water, and so they're already warm and stressed, and then you catch them and it's another stress. But we're catching fish out of cooler water, so and the body, their whole core temperature doesn't change in just 2 minutes being brought up through, so their insides are still a little bit cooler. So thinking, well, maybe their survival in the middle of summer might be something like it would be in April. Really don't know. And the data that we have so far indicates that there will be some fish die in the summer if you do catch and release. We can't give you a number or any of that, but fish are going to die in the summer if they're released, some percentage of them. And coming out of cool water doesn't necessarily completely fix everything.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Okay.